Hey guys, my guest tonight, Marc Hartzman, is going to tell us stories about the weird and unusual. We'll be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust, turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. How's everybody doing tonight? Hang on a second, I got some private messages coming through. Give me a sec. Okay. Mark, I don't see anybody yet in. I should, but a second here. Hang on. Let me get this thing going here. Then we can start the show. Okay. Okay, everybody, welcome. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. Sorry about that. New buttons to push, right? I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you have a paranormal need or think you have a paranormal need, we could help you out with that. It might take us a while to get to you. California is this huge state, but we can help you out. Anyway, welcome. Happy Tuesday. I got a great guest tonight. He's been on the show before. Weird and odd tales, weird and odd news and tales and things like that. And one thing we're going to probably be covering here is swordsmen, people that swallow swords, which is interesting to me because as a kid, I remember, growing up when I did grow up, things weren't like they are now with weapon with toy weapons. It used to be the guns look like guns and and all this, and the knives. Some of the knives were rubber. And some of the knives actually, when you put them against yourself or put them against your arm, would collapse into the handle. Okay, and so I always thought of people that swallowing swords, that having swords like that, where it would collapse in the handle. So I don't know. I think Mark knows more about that than I do. Anyway, let me bring Mark on. We can get the show started and start talking about some weird stuff. Okay, here we go. I see you both. We're good. So I got one.
There we go.
All right.
Here we
Hello.
go. All right. How's
Mark,
it going?
your head is bigger than mine. I have to get closer.
That's okay. I'm way off to the side. Where the direction am I going? There we go. Block Talk does this different because they always stack it. You know what I can do? Hang on a second. Let's do a restack on this.
There we go.
There
Better.
we go. That's better. Okay. I was so used to using not Block Talk, but I was so used to using StreamYard. Then when I switched to this, it's
Brady
like,
Bunch.
yeah. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
So how are you guys doing?
Great.
Doing well. How you doing?
I'm
Nice
doing
to be
good.
back.
It's good to be back. It feels good. Now, as you probably heard at the beginning of the show, I was talking about kids' toys. Back in the day. I'm going to say back in the day when I was a kid. I'm not going to say how old I am. But kids' toys were a lot different than they are now because guns look like guns. And the knives we had were either rubber or they were the collapsible kind. You push them against your body
Right.
and they
I
would
had one
collapse
of
right
those.
in. Yeah, into the handle. And I heard you the other night, on the other show, talking about sword swallowers, and that fascinated the heck out of me.
Yeah. Well, Dan's the sword swallower. We just put together this new book, To the Hilt. That's Dan on the
Wow.
cover.
Wow.
Sword Swallower's History of Sword Swallowing. So this
What?
book features
I have one too.
more than
Fantastic.
100 sword swallowers, all kinds of amazing photos, bios, stories from modern day sword swallowers, all kinds of crazy adventures that they've had, and a lot of information about Dan's history and how he got into this and the amazing things that he's done. So it's a
Well, let's
fascinating
hear it.
topic.
Let's hear the history. Let's hear it. What's what we're here for.
So when I was a kid, I grew up in Indiana in a small town, and I grew up in extreme fear. The first 20 years of my life, I had extreme fear. I couldn't talk. I would shake and stutter, and the bullies would tease me and beat me up. So I vowed I wanted to do real magic, real feats, do things that the bullies could not do. And I was fascinated with UFOs and ghosts and Bigfoot and Loch Ness, like a lot of people are. I'm fascinated with that kind of thing, the unusual kind of thing. And when I was 20 years old, I ended up living in India for a year and lived in the area where sword swallowing started, and actually got to see some of the old sword swallowers in the villages there in Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, India. And it wasn't until 20 years later, when I was 40 years old, that I was trying to do a bunch of these different things. At that time, I was a juggler, a stilt walker, unicycle rider. Uh, I had learned to ride elephants in India. And so I enjoyed doing that kind of stuff. But in 1997, I heard there were less than 12 sword swallowers left in the entire world. I ran into one, George the Giant from Bakersfield, California. And I said, give me some tips. And he said, I'll give you 2 tips. Number one, extremely dangerous. 29 people have died doing it. There's less than a dozen people left in the world doing this. Number 2, don't try it. Well, I wrote it down. I worked on it for 4 years, 10 to 12 times a day, every day, a total of about 14,000 unsuccessful attempts before I got my first sword down February 12th of 2001. And now it's taken me to 60 countries around the world, and about 15 or 20 Ripley's museums and 15 Got Talent shows. And it's been a blast, blowing people's minds and showing them that you can do the impossible in your life.
When you say unsuccessful attempts, that brings that picture's not very pretty.
No. Let's say I spent a lot of time decorating my shoes. Yeah, that's one way of putting it.
Wow.
No, I didn't actually, but you gag a lot. You have to get past the gag reflex first, and you hit the back of the throat, and you can't find the right alignment back there, and it just takes years and years. In 2005, 2006, I did a medical paper with a doctor in England, and we did a medical research questionnaire paper on all the known sword swallowers. And we found out that it takes most sword swallowers from 3 to 5 years, some from 5 to 10 years. And I had one student that I mentored for 10 years, and he still can't do it to this day. So it is extremely difficult, and it is something you just can't pick it up overnight and do it, pretty I got invited to be on Fear Factor, and they said, well, could you teach the host, in an afternoon? I'm like, nah, it's not going to happen. So it does take quite a while, and it is extremely dangerous. We've had 29 people that have died from sword swallowing injuries that we know of. And I'm the president of the Sword Swallowers Association International. So we get 3 to 5 phone calls every year from somebody who's in the hospital, and their voice is real raspy, and they're like, I did it. I punctured my esophagus, or I punctured my stomach, and I'm in the hospital. I'm on IV, and you just have to be in the hospital for 4 to 6 weeks. It can cost from $75,000 to $100,000 for medical bills. So it is extremely dangerous. Don't try this at home.
We have a warning in the book, actually, from that doctor, and scattered throughout the book. Do not try this at home. Nothing you read in this book should be taken as instruction. It's just people's experiences, a little different for everyone, I'm sure. And it is very dangerous, as Dan was just saying.
I mean, you have to have perfect, and you can't see where it's going. I mean, literally, you have to understand. I guess you would have to know where that route is to get down, to be able to get down.
Because some sword swallowers can see where it's going when they hook it up with an X-ray machine, and they can watch it going through their body. Dan has a photo we have in the book. Let's see if I can find that really quick, where you see the blade in the body. Oh, here's one. This one's not Dan. This is Mimi Garneau from mid 20th century. If you can, sorry, my lighting's a little weird.
Wow. Yeah.
But you can see that blade going down through the X-ray, and that's Mimi right there.
Wow. And here's mine.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
As long as we're playing show and tell, you can see it a little bit.
Wow.
There you go.
So it's 100% real.
Wow, I never knew that. I mean, seriously, that's because with the collapsible blades that they had years ago, I thought, well, yeah, it's a collapsible blade. My dad used to go, it's a collapsible blade. That is incredible.
A lot of
Yeah.
people think that. I know Dan goes through that kind of thing, and he can tell you more about that. Other sword swallowers through history have had the same audience assumption. So that would be a fake one that
That's the
Dan's showing.
There's
classical
one there. Yeah,
ones.
that's
But
yeah.
a lot of sword swallowers will swallow all kinds of different objects that don't have any retractable blade, and that would be very clear, as you see there. What would that be?
Forceps.
Giant
Forceps.
forceps, giant hedge clippers, pool cues, giant
I mean,
screwdrivers,
oh my God, I can't
um,
imagine.
giant soup ladles. What else am I forgetting? Straight razors, giant straight razors, a saw,
Saw, 28-inch saw. Yeah.
Wow.
rifles that's been swallowed. So again, all kinds of objects that there would be no handle for that blade to somehow retract into if people don't believe the actual swords are real.
All
But
right,
they
let's
are.
just get this out there quick too, guys. Whoever you are watching this and who's going to be watching this is not for you to do. Don't do
No.
this on your own. This is a no-no.
Nope. Contact
Don't
Mark.
be doing. Don't be doing this stuff at home.
Just write about it like I do. It's much
Yeah. Don't be
much
doing this
easier
stuff
and
at home.
still fun.
Wow. How long does it? I mean, it's a lot like as far as I understand about the gag reflex, here and trying to get it down in there. And I mean,
Mhm.
when they look at me for a strep throat, I about die. You know what I mean? It's like
Me too.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I can't imagine getting past that. But then, how do you How do you figure out like the direction to go once you get
So
that access?
when I was studying, I bought Gray's Anatomy. I studied all the anatomy books. And every time I'd go into the doctor's office, I'd look at the posters on the wall and look at the esophagus and the lungs and the heart and the stomach and to see how it all worked. And I had to really train myself. It helped my nurse. My mom was a nurse. My dad was an x-ray technician years before. So I had a basic understanding, but I studied it very thoroughly. And every time I would find a doctor or go in for a doctor or a chiropractor for an x-ray or something, I'd ask them all the anatomy questions, and I had to learn the anatomy really, really thoroughly. And when you swallow a sword, I'll show you a little dagger here. I'm not going to swallow it here, but when you get ready to swallow a sword, you have to slide it into the oral cavity, into the mouth, over the tongue. When you get to the back of the throat, it runs into the very first reflex, which is the gag reflex. When you hit the back of your throat, then you have to navigate a 90-degree turn down the cervical esophagus right here behind the promenation laryngeum, the Adam's apple. When you get to this point, the blade can go in one of two different directions. It can either go down the esophagus and into my stomach, or down my trachea, my bronchial tubes, and into my lungs. Now, in my case, I really hope it goes down the esophagus and into my stomach.
Okay.
So then when you get behind the Adam's apple here, there's a thing called the epiglottis. And the epiglottis is a little flap that kind of closes off your airwaves so that when you drink water, it doesn't go into your lungs. And so that when you do swallow food, it doesn't go into your lungs. So you have to flip that open. And that took me 4 years to learn how to flip that open. And some people, it takes even longer than that. Then you have to repress the peristalsis reflex, which is the 22 pairs of muscles that swallows your food down into your stomach. It kind of squishes your food. Like if you have mashed potatoes, it squishes it down into your stomach. When it gets into the center of the chest, the blade goes between the lungs. It runs into the highest concentration of blood vessels in the human body, an organ known as the cardiac muscle or the heart. When you get to the heart is kind of the center left of your body. The esophagus curls around the heart. So when I get to my heart, I actually nudge my heart to the left and back a little bit. So when you look at my blade, you can see the blade beat with my heart like this because it's leaning against the heart, separated by 1/8 of an inch of esophageal tissue. When I go past the heart, it gets down to the breastbone, the sternum. I go about 1.5 inches past that. It goes down to what's called the LES, the lower esophageal sphincter. And I bet nobody's said that word on your program before.
No.
But when I get to the LES, it's a really tight, like a rubber band that kind of closes off your esophagus from your stomach. And I have to relax that. And that took me another 9-10 months after I got past the epiglottis. Relax that, slide it past the liver and kidneys into the stomach, and repress the retch reflex in the stomach that wants to eject everything out of your stomach. And you go all the way down to the bottom of your stomach to your duodenum or duodenum. If I go further than that, all the way down to my fallopian tubes. Piece of cake.
Wow. Don't
In case
anybody
anybody
try
didn't get
this.
that, I don't have fallopian tubes.
I know. I was laughing about that. I'm gonna have nightmares about this stuff now. How long and how did you two meet up? That's the question I have.
We met up. Do you want to take it?
About 20 some years ago at the
Mhm.
sideshow gathering in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
So there was a gathering of different sideshow performers, kind of like a convention. And so I was there. I was writing about sideshows at that point. And Dan was there organizing a world record for the most number of sword swallowers gathered in one place because we had all these different sideshow performers together. So we had, at that point, you had what, 19 gathered, swallowing, I think,
Yeah,
50 swords?
I had just founded the Sword Swallowers Association International, SSAI, the year before in 2001. And when I heard about this sideshow gathering, I said, do you mind if I bring some sword swallowers? And they said, great. Yeah, there's going to be a few there already. So I thought, you know what? If we have more than 2 sword swallowers swallowing swords at the same time, we've got a Guinness World Record. So I promoted it as a Guinness World Record, and everybody wanted to get in on that. They didn't want to be left out on it. So we ended up with 19 sword swallowers that showed up. And we ended up swallowing 50 swords at once between the 19 of us on stage at the same time. We had one who didn't want to get on stage with us.
Mhm.
And 5 years later, we did that same convention through to about 2005 or 2006. And we ended up breaking the number of swords. We swallowed 54 swords, and this time it was only 9 people swallowed 54. And we got another Guinness World Record for that. So, and then Mark and I met up there, and we've been in touch ever since. And when I'm performing at different Ripley's that he and his family happen to be at, we connect up.
I've written about Dan a few different times.
Mhm.
I used to write for AOL Weird News. I had the sideshow beat, which was a lot of fun. And so I wrote about World Sword Swallowers Day with Dan. Oh gosh, I was probably around 2010 or so.
Mhm.
And then shortly after that, he was at the Bruce Museum in Greenwich, Connecticut. They had a circus exhibit, and part of Dan's collection was in that exhibit. He has a collection of swords from a sword swallower who's in the book To the Hilt. Her name is Edith Clifford, and Dan owns a bunch of her swords. These are well over 100 years old. So the swords were on display as part of the exhibit, and he swallowed her saw. Dan showed one of the saws earlier. That was not her specifically, but it was similar that she had. So that was he gave a lecture at the museum. So I covered the lecture, took photos, and wrote up that story. That my headline was "Man Swallows 100-Year-Old Museum Exhibits" because he swallowed that saw that she owned, which was pretty amazing. And yeah, so we've been in touch, like I said, over the years. And then Dan came to me about 7 years ago and said, "Hey, I want to put a book together." He'd been collecting information on these sword swallowers from history for 25 or so years, compiled on his website, swordswallow.com. So we gathered that information, added more information, did a lot more research, interviewed various people, family members from some of those sword swallowers Dan's been in touch with, and gathered tons of amazing photos, lots of rare images, stuff that I don't think's ever been, hasn't been published. If it's been published, it's been 80 years or so. So yeah, we were thrilled to get this book done. It's really beautiful. It's been a great project to work with Dan on. No one knows this information like he does. So you're not only getting information about historical sword swallowers, but you're getting it from the perspective of someone who really does it and the kind of knowledge that very few people on Earth have.
When is the earliest report of a sword swallower?
As far as we can tell from studying the ancient Sanskrit, there were sword swallowers back in ancient India about 4,000 years ago, about 2000 BC. And from studying the ancient Sanskrit, as far as I can tell, the very first sword swallower was probably a little Indian fakir guru by the name of Babu Patel Katula Rataya Ramaswamy Rajendran Gupta. But his friends all called him Bob. So no, we don't know who the first one was.
Find any keychains with his name
That's
on it.
right. But we have references way back to about 2000 BC in India, Mesopotamia, different cultures around the world have had it. But as far as I can tell, it seems to have been in India, in that same tribe that I had lived with when I was 20 years old and a witness when I was 20. And then it went north from India up into China, became popular in China, moved over to Greece and Rome in the first centuries, and then up into Europe in the Middle Ages. It was actually outlawed in Europe up until 1893. In Sweden, Norway outlawed until 1893, just because it was so grotesque or absurd or demonic to some people. But it wasn't until 1893 that it became really popular in the United States. First sword swallower that we know of in the United States was about 1815 or 1819. Either Ramaswamy or Senasama were two Indian guys that came over, and they performed over here and in London quite a bit. And it started getting kind of popular. And then there were just very few, trickle of sword swallowers up until about 1893. Then at the Chicago World's Fair of 1893, they trotted out some sword swallowers. Buffalo Bill had his troupe, and he had a sword swallower there by the name of Professor Griffin, and Charles Griffin, and several other sword swallowers. And they had this new light bulb. They had, lights on all the time, and it was like a high-tech deal. And millions of people went through and saw these sword swallowers. And it was about 1891 or 1892 that Delno Fritz and Clicquot and a couple other guys kind of got started. Victorina's got started about that time. And so it kind of started taking off. And Barnum and some of the circuses said, oh, we can use this. And it got real popular in the 1930s and 40s and 50s. And then in the 60s, as the circuses started to shrink, sideshows started to shrink, it kind of diminished a little bit. The last circus sword swallower that I know of died in 1979 or 80, Francis Duran. He died from swallowing a neon tube with Ringling Brothers at the Houston Astrodome, and the tube shattered inside of him. He ended up getting pneumonia. He lived for a year, but he died ultimately of the pneumonia from the glass in his stomach. And so that's kind of the golden ages, kind of between 1893 and about 1980 or so here in the United States.
Are there any left now? I mean, obviously you're here, but I mean, as far as like up here in the 20, it's 2025 right now.
Yep.
Are there any out there now?
There are right now. There are less than a few dozen full-time professional sword swallowers actively performing around the world today. Now, by that, it means we've got a handful in Hollywood that will be performing on Saturday at the Ripley's, believe it or not, in Hollywood for World Sword Swallowers Day. We've got some showing up in Orlando. I will be here in Phoenix and Scottsdale at the Ripley's in Scottsdale. My sword swallower from Germany, the best sword swallower in Europe, is flying over here. And he's like my brother. We're going to swallow swords together at Ripley's. We've got some in Ocean City, Maryland, one in Ocean City, Maryland, one in Myrtle Beach, two in Grand Prairie, Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth area. So there are a few, but there are less than a few dozen in the world right now. Out of a world population of 8 billion people, that makes me rather unique at being one out of every 350 million people or so. There are more people that have gone into outer space or climbed to the top of Mount Everett or have run the 4-minute mile than have swallowed swords. Or over 2,000 people have gone into climb to the top of Mount Everett. And so it is extremely rare. It's not, I think for me, the fun of it is performing when everybody thinks it's fake. It's just going to be a magic trick. And I hand them the sword and say, okay, show me the button, show me where that piece of metal is going to fold up. And by the end of my show, when I start my shows, 99% of the people think it's fake. By the time I'm done, 99% of them think it's really, really real. They believe it. And they have these paradigm shifts during my show. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's for real. And I'll swallow the sword. I'll impale an orange with it. I'll throw it into the floor. I'll fling them up in the air. I do hedge clippers and straight razors and just crazy stuff. A car axle that can't shrink up in the handle. So
the neon tube that Dan mentioned that Francis Duran had swallowed and it ultimately died from is another example of something that sword swallowers will swallow to prove that this is for real. And what they'll do is they swallow the tube, it's plugged in, the lights go dim, and you see it glow through their throat, like you see the glow in their body.
Yep.
So that's a pretty powerful visual.
We have one girl in the book. This was a new revelation to me, but the neon tube would shine through her belly button, that it would.
Right.
It won't go through your chest. If you look at a
Uh-huh.
slab of ribs, and there's no way you can get a light to shine through the slab of ribs,
Right.
but it will shine through your neck and, in her case, through her belly button.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we have a lot of the modern day sword swallowers. We interviewed them, and we just got interesting stories. We call it cutting up jackpots, which is slang for swapping stories. So we
Mhm.
have the bios for the historical sword swallowers, and then just these really remarkable experiences that modern day performers have had, whether it was how they learned, injuries they suffered, crazy things they've done to push the art to another level.
Mhm.
Flame throwing sword swallowers swallows a sword and like shoots flames from it while it's in his throat, which is quite a visual. So lots of creativity goes into sword swallowing.
Do you think, as you look at this, like you say, pushing to the next level, somebody is always going to do that no matter what. No matter what skill they have, somebody is always going to try to one up somebody. Do you think that it's ever going to reach a peak of what people are swallowing?
Um,
Good
it
question.
might. It might. When my buddy Franz from Germany, when he and I go walking, when he's here in the States, we go through Costco or Home Depot or Lowe's, and we're looking at anything that's long and pointy. We're we're looking at the barbecue tools and the long nails and just anything we can see that's interesting, and we find ideas there. Um,
I bet
but
you're fun at the hardware stores, boy. I'll tell you.
hardware stores, we love them. We just have a little warped at the way that we look at things a little differently than most people
They're
do.
different shoppers.
Different shoppers. Um, I decided I wanted to take it to a kind of a different level, and in 2007 I swallowed this sword here, a nice long one here, about a 30-inch sword with 24, almost 25-inch long blade. Swallowed this one 20 feet underwater in a tank of 88 sharks and stingrays for Ripley's Myrtle Beach and the Ripley's aquarium there, and got a Ripley's cartoon out of that. When I swallowed the saw, Edith Clifford's 110-year-old saw that Mark took the photo of, that one ended up being a cartoon for Ripley's, believe it or not, my very first cartoon on Ripley's. And then the Shark Tank was my second one. And then in 2013 for World Sword Swallowers Day, it's always the last Saturday of February that we celebrate Sword Swallowers Day. February is National Swallowing Disorders Month, so we always put it at the last Saturday in February. And so the stunt that I did for Ripley's Baltimore is they had a beautiful Mini Cooper car that was covered in $1 million worth of Swarovski crystals that weighed about an extra 300 pounds. And I swallowed a short sword, about an 18-inch long sword, that was attached to 2 towing straps attached to the car. And I pulled that car out of the Ripley's, believe it or not, and into the Inner Harbor area in front of a bunch of media and everything. And that blew up. And 3 years later, America's Got Talent called me and had me back on America's Got Talent. I'd been on to the finals in 2008. And in 2016, they had me back, and I pulled Nick Cannon in a car across the stage on America's Got Talent in 2016. Wow. And then I got a phone call from Italy, Tuse Caballas in Italy, and they had me come and pull a car there. And then France's Got Talent, Israel's Got Talent, Spain's Got Talent, Croatia's Got Talent, Sweden's Got Talent. I won the Golden Buzzer, and I went back and did the finals, made it to number 3 in the finals. I speak Swedish, and then I went on and did Germany's Das Super Talent and pulled a car for them, and Canada's Got Talent. So it's been a fun run, but I like taking it to another level. But at this point, my maximum level is 29 swords at once. And I keep thinking, should I go for 30 or just leave it at 29? I think I'm going to leave it at one more sword. Do a little Edith Clifford sword.
It's only wafer thin.
That's right.
I can't. I mean, I can hardly imagine one, and then putting in more than one. Okay. I'll have nightmares. Thanks so much, Mark. I'm having nightmares over all this.
Well, I got to tell you, when I first started as a kid, my first 20 years when I grew up in such fear, my mantra was, I can't. My dad would say, see if you can get in the pool and swim across the other. If you swim across the width of the pool, I'll give you $5. No, I can't. That was what I did as a little kid. I didn't think I could do anything. Yeah. So I would see everything as impossible to me. And now that I've gotten into sword swallowing, I look at everything just the opposite. I look when people say, well, it's 99% impossible to swallow a sword, I'm like, well, I'm going to look for that 1% and figure out how to line everything up medically and how to make it work. And then how to do that, not only with one sword, but with 29 swords, or 2 or 5 or 10 or 29, or pull a car, or in a shark tank, or lifting weights. I lift buckets of water that are attached to a sword and bend over and pick it up, and it hurts, but it's possible. So now my whole attitude has changed, kind of like when we walk through Home Depot and Lowe's. I'm looking at things completely differently, but same thing with doing the impossible. I don't look at that 99% that's impossible. I look at that 1% and try and figure out a way to make it possible.
Gotcha. Now, your mom and dad being in the medical field, like they were, when you first told them you wanted to do this, what was their reaction? Because I mean, they know all about the human body, and
They did. I did not tell them the first 4 years I was practicing. I was working in the music business in Nashville. I didn't tell them. After I got the sword down, the very first day, February 12th, I adjusted my posture. I'd been doing it with one hand like this, and I was a little bit crooked. And I adjusted my posture and put my other hand up, and I straightened up and went back a little further. And all of a sudden, the sword went down about 6 or 8 inches. And I thought, oh my gosh, did I just impale my heart, my lungs? I think it felt really weird, but I think I'm okay. It didn't really hurt. You wait until the next day to see the results of your output to make sure you don't have any blood. And then I thought, you know what? I think I can do this. And it took another 2-3 years just to get used to it. I always made a really ugly face when I was doing it. And then I finally got to the point where I could smile and laugh and even sing while I'm swallowing a sword. But just being able to stick a sword down your throat for 1 second is not an act.
Right.
You've got to be able to put together a full show. Now, I do an hour show at state fairs. This next year, I'm doing Wyoming State Fair, Eastern Idaho State Fair, a bunch of fairs throughout the country, and Renaissance festivals, Clayshore Castle Festival, different things like that. So I do about an hour show, and it's mostly a lot of comedy, kind of teasing people to see if they can figure out what the trick really is. So they're watching carefully, thinking I'm going to push a button and make it, fake or whatever. And by the end, they realize, holy cow, that's for real. And that's the fun of it, is inspiring them to do the impossible in their lives.
Now, Mark, you'll remember from our last interview that my father was the one that grew up going to sideshows and different things like that. He got me into it. In fact, the books are still here. Freaks, those books that they wrote?
Yeah.
They're still here. And when I talked to you last time, we talked a little bit about my background. And even when Barnum and Bailey came here, and I can't remember what year it was, because I used to cover the circus when they would come every year, and they still had a sideshow at that point.
Yep.
And I remember my dad being so excited to go to the sideshow of Barnum and Bailey. But I think where I've seen the sword swallowers is like he says is the state fair. That's where I've seen these sideshows with these guys that do this, because Barnum and Bailey kind of got away from that over the years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
When Barnum and Bailey stopped doing the canvas tents in about 1957, they went indoors to indoor coliseums. They didn't have a sideshow much after that. They did in Madison Square Gardens in New York, and every year Esteline Pike would perform there, and her son Jim Ball Lucky, would perform with her at Madison Square Gardens, and they did that through to about 1967, I think. So you may have seen them with Ringling, or some of the smaller sideshows still did have Hoxie Brothers, Carson and Barnes, Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers also had some sword swallowers into the 70s and 80s.
And now you have there's still some sideshows performing. So like at Coney Island, they've had sword swallowers at the Coney Island sideshow really since, I'd say, the late 80s, right?
Oh yeah,
pretty consistently, I believe. And
since the 30s in Coney Island.
Yes, I meant like since the current current show at Coney Island, the current 10-in-1 show. But yes, overall, for sure, going way back. World of Wonders show, which used to be owned by Ward Hall and Chris Christ, longtime showman, is now owned by Tommy Breen, a sword swallower, and we have some stories from him in the book. So they still travel, play the fairs, and they, like I said, Tommy, the owner, is a sword swallower, but he may have others on the show or not. But
I got to work with him twice this summer at at a fair in Illinois and a fair in Nebraska,
Hmm.
and he and his sword swaller, we hung out together and we all comparing notes and everything. It was a lot of fun. Really
And
is.
then when Jim Rose kind of, when he was touring with Lollapalooza in the early '90s, he had a sword swallower, and that was kind of probably introducing it to a brand new audience with, the rock and roll audience, which was huge for Sideshow at that point. Really helped rejuvenate it in a lot of
Right.
ways. So
Right.
another way that
Right.
people may have been introduced to it.
I was just thinking of Venice Beach too, because they have a sideshow there.
Yes, the Venice Beach
Yeah.
Freak Show.
Yeah, the freak
Mhm.
show. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
we talked to. So we both know the owner, Todd Ray, and his daughter Asia Ray is in the book. She's a sword swallower. She learned while she was working there.
As a
Makes
matter of
sense.
fact, Todd called me and said, "We want you to come be on AMC Freak Show, but I won't tell you what it's about." So I said, "Okay." So we made the arrangements. I flew out there, and they had me come in. And he said, "Well, I want to introduce you to my daughter Asia," and she was, I think, 17 or almost 18 at the time. And he said she wants to show you something. And she had been secretly working on sword swallowing, so she made her public debut in front of me, the president of the Sword Swallowers Association, to verify that she indeed did swallow the sword. And that episode was an episode all about sword swallowing that aired on Sword Swallowers Day that particular year. I don't remember what year it was, maybe 13 or 2015 or something like that. So yeah, it was a great show. It's closed down now in Venice Beach,
Hmm.
I believe.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
unfortunately, it was really wonderful. They
it
put
was
on
great. Yeah, you've been there
not only
too.
the show but the museum and everything. The live two-headed animals he had. It was really quite extraordinary.
Yeah. Absolutely. When you do this, and I know it must be exciting for the audience, to see. Like you say, you turn it into like a comedy act kind of thing.
Mhm.
How are you able to make, like we keep saying with this, kids, don't do this at home. Don't do this. Don't do it on your own without somebody that knows what they're doing or whatever. When you're doing this on stage, how does the audience act at first, as opposed to how they act at the end? Because I'm
Uh,
sure there's some, you know,
oh yeah,
detractors.
there's a lot of skeptics, a lot of people that won't watch. People tell me, "Oh, I won't watch." I'm
Uh
like,
huh.
"Oh yeah, I'll make you watch." And they cover their eyes the first sword or so. And usually I start out by saying, when I first started doing this, I would just swear up and down, "No, it's really real. It's really real," and nobody would believe me. So I thought, well, that doesn't work. I'm going to take the opposite tact. So I now I go out on stage and I'm like, "Oh, come on, y'all know sword swallowing is a trick. You can't really swallow a sword without slitting your throat, without impaling yourself. You can't really, do the impossible now, can you?" So everybody's nodding their head. So watch carefully, watch my fingers, watch my lips, watch my throat, see if you can figure out what the trick really is. So they're leaning in, watching, thinking it's going to be comedy or whatever, fake.
Uh huh.
And I do the two fake swords, the curl up sword and the telescopic sword in the beginning, and I expose those. And every time I swallow them, they're covering their eyes, they can't watch. And then they kind of peek a little bit, and then I expose it, let it curl up or fold up. And they all look at me like, "I knew it was fake. I knew it." And so they feel vindicated.
Right.
Then I do this small sword, this one here, and I'm pale and orange with it. And then I swallow it very slowly. And I have some really heavy, creepy music. I swallow it very slowly, and I pull it out very slowly. And I say, "Show of hands, how many of you believe I really swallowed the sword?" And about half of them are like, maybe. "How many of you think it's fake?" About half of them. I said, "If this were a real sword, it would have real impact, right? If this were a real sword, it would have real impact." And I throw it down into the floor, and it stands on the floor like this.
That
And
works.
everybody sits up, "Whoa, it's really loud. Now, how many of you believe that's real?" Oh, they all raise their hands. And then I do the hedge clippers, the straight razor, the saw, a serpentine sword, curved sword, car axle. And then I have a female
Wow.
volunteer come up and pull the sword out of my throat. And it makes it fun. By that time, and every time I do it, I say, "Do not try this at home. Kids, if you happen to have a serpentine
Right.
sword or car axle laying around the house, don't swallow."
Car axle.
And they're like, "What?"
It happens.
It happens. That's right.
Sit
And
in
by
the
the time
corner.
I'm done, and I've said that, my announcer says it very heavily, "Do not try this at home. This is extremely dangerous." By the time I'm done, I ask the kids, "Now, you're not going to try that, are you?" And they're like, "Oh, no, sir, not at all." So I kind of make sure that they get the message that it is dangerous.
I'm gonna have to Google the car axle. That just blows my mind.
It's about 16 pounds. This one came from Model A. I don't think I have it right here. It's Model A car axle. 1929.
Yeah.
And it was first swallowed by a guy by the name of Arthur Plumoff, who was a Ripley's, believe it or not, for doing human blockhead and pincushion and different other things. But apparently he was also a sword swallower, and he swallowed the car axle. He gave it to Ward Hall, who ran, as Mark was saying, Ward Hall's Worlds of Wonders. And he passed it on to Red Stewart, who's one of our older sword swallowers, who's been doing it since 1966, 67. And then he bequeathed it on to me a few years ago. And it was a week later, I got invited on to do America's Got Talent. And I thought, I'm going to be on national TV. I'm going to do the car axle here, So I did. And it went great. But stupid me, I let go of it and kind of went to bow a little bit. And I like, holy cow, that thing's heavy. It's almost punctured through my stomach and my intestines. It was so heavy. And so I've learned not to let go of it, let it drop quickly, so easily. But
16 pounds, it's pretty heavy.
It is heavy. That's right. You've seen it.
Yeah.
So, Mark, when you started researching the book, did you expect these gentlemen to be different than what they turned out to be? I mean,
well, I'll
love
tell
this
you
guy.
one thing I was really happy about when I was researching and going through Dan's notes and
Yeah.
digging, and there's so many. While they're all sword swallowers, their stories are all really quite unique. They're all interesting characters in different ways. Yes, they swallow swords and they do different kinds of stunts with the swords in many cases, but they all have like unique pathways to swallowing swords. One of them, for example, we mentioned Jim Ball, who is about 90 years old. He's the oldest living sword swallower. He's been doing this for 77 years. His mother, Esteline Pike, was a sword swallower, and his father, Lucky Ball, was a sword swallower. Now, Lucky Ball, in I guess the early 1900s, he was in a circus family, and he was a lion tamer, and one of the lions bit him in the face. So he thought, like, oh, well, this is no good. Like, I got to find something a little safer. So he wanted to stay in the circus. He had to stay in the show, the family business, right? So he learned to swallow swords instead. He took the safer route and became a sword swallower.
I'll just put something sharp down my throat. That's a lot safer.
So much safer. See, Mom, Dad, I'm fine now.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's just lots of unique stories. They're really interesting, and of course, there's plenty of injuries covered in the book. There's another story of another married couple, actually. Maud de Alden and
Delno Fritz.
Yes. So they were performing on a ship in front of King George V. So this was quite a show, right? And of course, there's other people in the audience watching all this. And as you've been hearing Dan talk about it, of course, there's the audience doesn't believe this is real. So Maud would pass her sword around so the audience could inspect it to make sure this thing was steel. As Dan said, there's no button, nothing that retracts the blade. And apparently one of the people in the audience may have like tapped it against a table or something, kind of testing its, how solid it is or whatever it might be, and inadvertently nicked the blade. And so when Maud went to swallow it, of course, she didn't realize it was nicked by someone in the audience. That nick caught her in the throat and the esophagus and tore the esophagus as she was pulling the sword out. And that injury led to her death. So there are some real stories of the actual injuries that did ultimately become fatal. So again, you have like the kind of, interesting, odd stories, some quirky stories, and you certainly have some real serious stories as well of severe injuries. But again, overall, really various colorful characters in all different kinds of ways. It really made it a joy to research and write about.
What do you think fascinates people about this?
I think it's seeing the impossible, right, Dan? Seeing the impossible before your eyes.
I think it's a combination of things. Part of it is the history. When they find out this is something that's 4,000 years old and it's an ancient art, it's fascinating. But like Mark said, it's doing the impossible because everybody just says, no, you can't do that. I mean, it's got to be fake. It's got to be a trick. And that's, for me, that's the fun of it is, I know when I walk into a venue, I got a bag full of solid steel swords. If I wanted to, I could offer anybody $1,000 or $10,000 or $1 million bet that this is real. And they're, and I know they can't prove that it's fake because it's not fake. I've got the X-rays, and so for me, it's the fun is that it is real, but people don't believe it, and it's getting them to that point of belief when I flip their brain over and they go, "Oh my gosh, that's real," and then it makes a profound impact on people. The other thing that we've kind of found as I've been researching people for 27 years, and as we've been going through deeper research, there's kind of a trend. A lot of sword swallowers start when they're 16, 17, 18, 20, 21, when they get that kind of bravado, like, boy, I'm going to do something crazy with my life. I want to run away and join a circus.
Sure.
So a lot of them start there. A lot of us have come from backgrounds where we were teased or bullied or had fear. We were talking with George the Giant, the guy that kind of got me into it. And he had fear as a kid too, and was teased for being different. And he's 7'3". And so a lot of us have a lot of the same similarities. And when we swallow swords, we get a lot of the same reactions. We get the same questions. Everybody asks, how did you learn? Why do you do it? Have you been hurt? What does it feel like? Is this for real? What's the history? So we get all the same questions, and we kind of have bonded together as a little bit of a group. And every year, like on this next Saturday on World Sword Swallowers Day, we get together and we do a big swallow at the Ripleys around the world. And this year it will be on 2/22/25 is the date. And the time will be 2:22 and 25 seconds is when we will all swallow swords together, local time, at the different Ripleys. So if you're near Hollywood or Dallas, Grand Prairie, or Orlando, or here in Phoenix, Scottsdale, or Ocean City, different places, definitely show up. Myrtle Beach, show up and cheer on your sword swallower friend. And the book will be available on that day. We're doing a sneak release just for the sword swallowers and the Ripley's museums that have got an early stash of books. So it'll be about 6 days earlier than for the general public, or you can order it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Target, Walmart. And Amazon sent a bunch of books out in the past couple of days. People have been getting their books early. So we're excited about that. It's really taken off. We've been #1 on the new release charts on Amazon, and it's been a lot of fun. So,
well, this is definitely something I'm going to get in honor of my father. I'll add it to the collection.
It's a good one for the collection. It's a beautiful big book. We'll call it.
Beautiful. If you don't have Marc's book, get his book, American Sideshow, that he put out in 2005, 2006.
I have that one.
Yeah.
It's a great book.
Yeah, thank you.
I have that one. That's why I can add this one to my collection.
Yeah. Yep.
What do you say to people when, let's say you're out shopping somewhere, and I know this is kind of out there, but when somebody says, oh, I sell insurance. I mean, how do you sell somebody and say, well, I'm a sword swallower?
While I was sword swallowing, my dad sold Allstate insurance for 35 years.
Okay.
And he kept telling me, you got to quit this sword swallowing. When are you going to get a real job? And I'm like, Dad, it's taken me to 60 countries around the world. It's been a blast. I love impacting people's lives and doing TED Talks and performing, all over the place. So I absolutely love it. But insurance is, okay, next question.
I was going to say, because I bet it's a humdinger to get insurance, life insurance for this.
People are a little reluctant. There are companies that we all get insurance through. So
okay, all right. So Marc, you've known him all these years, and you've been in and around the freak shows and all these years. What do you think stands out about the sword swallowers as opposed to, say, the elastic skin guy, the elastic skin man, or someone like that, or the fire eaters?
Well, elastic skin, a rubber skin person, that's a certain condition they're born with, right? So that's just something unique to them that they're able to do. I'm pretty sure that doesn't cause them any pain. They just happen to have a condition that causes stretchy skin. Fire eaters, I mean, I don't want to make real comparisons, but I would say there's certain acts that are called working acts. So the fire eating would be one, the human blockhead would be one, sword swallowing,
glass eating.
Glass eating, walking on glass, the bed of nails, all these different things, getting cinder blocks smashed while you're on the bed of nails. But sword swallowing is sort of, I think, would be at the top of the list there in terms of real difficulty like that. The other ones I think you can learn, and I mean I've learned to do the human blockhead, and I learned that very quickly. And something I would still like to have some, a professional with me as I'm doing it to make sure I'm guiding it the right spot and I don't hit my brain or something. But I've done it. And then that's not hard to do, right? Like you just have to know that you can do it, and then you do it. I could not do that with sword swallowing. Like Dan said, that takes a lot of practice, a lot of devotion, and it takes, the willpower and the desire to do it. Because if you don't, that the unsuccessful attempts could be very unsuccessful. So, so I think there's a real difference in terms of the time and effort that it takes to achieve that particular skill set.
Yeah, as Mark mentioned, there's two different types of sideshow acts, kind of in general. There are the natural born freaks that are people that have the rubber skin or different physical traits that they can take advantage of. And then there are self-made acts or the working acts that we kind of work our way up. And a lot of times, as I interview different people, I found out they started with juggling and they learned to juggle 3 balls. And they're like, wow, this is pretty cool. I can defy gravity and do 3 balls. And then they work to, fire eating and like, wow, that's pretty amazing. It's pretty neat. But it doesn't take a lot of time to learn it once you have the right training. And glass eating and human blockhead and pincushion and bed of nails, you kind of work your way up. And by the time they've learned a lot of those other feats first, then they're like, sword swallowing's the tip of the iceberg here. I gotta work on this one. And so a lot of times we get approached by different people who want us to teach them. Most of us do not teach other people very often. We try and keep it. We like to keep it to a small group that are just really dedicated to doing it. So I helped mentor Franz, my German sword swallower. I had one from India and one from Japan, Canada, that I've worked with. And I taught them sword swallowing. And I've got a few other folks that I kind of take under my wing and coach them on their acts and performing. But it's not something we want to do. We don't want to create a glut of little baby sword swallowers that are going to be competition for us, for one thing. And number two, there's a lot of liability involved, a lot of pain and injury and danger that we just don't want to be involved with.
Right. Understood.
Understandable. Yeah.
Absolutely understandable. So what's next for you guys after all this?
Well, I have another book in the works right now with on secret government projects. So that's coming out next year. But I'm hoping to work with the same publisher, Schiffer Publishing, on a similar type of book for knife throwing. So we'll see how that goes with a friend who's a knife thrower. Dan, top of the game in sword swallowing. This guy, the Great Throwdini's top of the game in knife throwing. So I'd love to do a knife thrower's history of knife throwing. So we'll see if that happens. But I've got plenty of other projects I'd like to do, and certainly this other project that's with my editor currently. So keep him busy as always.
And I'm excited. I'm excited about the book. This is my first book. It's Mark. Mark has done several of them. He's been a very good teacher, mentor for me. But I'm excited about this book, and I'm working on my memoirs, my autobiography. I've got a film crew that wants to do a film on the story of my life. And so they're pushing me to get that finished. And I'm working on that and a book on how to how to get a standing ovation on your TED Talk, and a children's book on how little daring Danny dared to do the impossible and swallow a sword. So I've got a few things I'm kind of working on. And in the meantime, I do a lot of county fairs, state fairs, Renaissance festivals, TV programs, different opportunities. And I think the book is going to open even more doors for us in podcasts like yours. And thank you again for having us on. This has been a blast for us.
Oh, it's been a blast. Yeah. I've enjoyed every second of it. Got to get you back on again. As always.
Would you like to see one sword swallow in person here?
Sure.
I think I can do it sitting down. I don't think I can get standing up here, but
don't do this at home, kids.
Kids, don't try this at home. This is about a 30-inch sword, about a 25-inch long blade. Goes down to the bottom of my stomach.
Wow.
and that's how it's done.
Oh my.
That's how it's done.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming on. You know the
Yeah, thanks for
question.
having us.
You know the question, Mark. You're standing on the strip in Las Vegas. Maybe in front of Circus. I don't know. But you're standing in front of the strip in Las Vegas, and there's a bunch of guys out there that have stories of books about the circus and whatnot. How do you get them to read this book?
Well, there's no other book like this.
No.
There's lots of books on circus and sideshow, as you know, but there's no book that covers just sword swallowing, the history of sword swallowing, the many amazing performers who've done it. So it's truly unique, and that's hard to say about kind of, I think, any topic for a book that nothing's really been written on before of this scale. So and like I said, it really is a big, beautiful book. It's 8.5 by 11 hardcover book. They did a really great job of production, so we're really happy with it. I think anyone who picks it up will be pleased to add it to their collection.
There we go. I will be adding to my collection, definitely, with
Thank
that
you.
one. That's in honor of my
Perfect.
father, too. All right. Well,
Wonderful.
thank you guys so much. I would love to have you on again sometime.
Would love
Thanks
to.
so much.
It's
Great
always
to be
fun.
here.
It's always fun. All right. Thank you both. I
Thank
hope
you so
have a
much.
great rest. Hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thanks.
Thanks,
You
you
too.
too.
Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Wow. I mean, I can't say that. Let me see something real quick. Hello, people in the chat room. I can't say it more. Thank you guys so much. That is just so fascinating to me. Like I said, I grew up around that. My dad was fascinated by all that stuff. So just having them on just totally totally blew me away. Just totally blew me away. Again, don't do this at home, kids. All right, tomorrow we're shifting gears. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about cryptids. Our old friend Lon Strickler is going to be on, and he's going to be talking about some new information he has about cryptids. So that's going to be at 5:30 p.m. Pacific. Now, while we're on the subject of circuses and sideshows and things like that, 7:15 p.m. Pacific, I will be doing tarot card reads for everybody over on TikTok, past, present, future. So if you're interested in that, come on over. The readings are free. Just come on over to TikTok and see what lies for you, lies waiting for you in the future. All right. Anyway, I want to thank you all for coming tonight, and I will see you tomorrow, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, again with Lon Strickler. And I want to thank Mark and Dan completely. I would love to, like I said, I'd like to get them back on to talk to them some more about this and pick their brains. But I want to thank them for coming on, and I appreciate each and every one of you that are watching this and who are going to be watching this. Okay? All right. Well, that's it then, and hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. For those of you that have a TikTok account, come on over to California Haunts. Like I said, I'll be doing readings in about 45 minutes, and come join me. We have a good time. I'm not like any psychic you have ever seen. Okay? I make it really fun. All right, guys. See you later.